Okay, this is a video on how to play Tour of Duty FNG man-to-man combat during the Vietnam War. For those unfamiliar with this particular game, I'll tell you that the FNG, the NG stands for new guy, and I'll let you make your own conclusions of what the F stands for. Just some acknowledgements before I start. The authors, Darby Eccles and Ed Texera. Thanks to Ed in particular. I had a conversation before doing this. And also thanks to John Cunningham, who also does some of the editorial and is always very helpful. Now, I've already done a how to play Nuts game, so both of these come from the 2-Hour War Games group, and this has a similar theme to it, so those who are familiar with that will be pleased to see how this game works. So just to start off with a couple of points is that you'll have seen through the introduction, the early video and pictures, is that it is a tabletop game. So this rule set comes out with an option about playing with counters, but this is with 28mm figures. And for myself, it is the American Army rather than the Marines, and the North Vietnamese Army, the NVA. I'm going to go through the rule set step by step, so apologies for those who are familiar. Some of the points I'll make are very obvious and fairly simple, but it's useful to try and cover as much as we can. However, I don't want to make this a huge video. I would just encourage people to pick up the game itself and run with it. And one of the most important things about it is very much it's your game. So in terms of the scale, it really looks at anything between the squad and the platoon. In reality, the whole point about this is to try and draw out some characters in the game. So you could be playing with a dozen, 15 on either side, and it's certainly a great way to just add some theatre to the war game itself. Just start with how we play. So you can play solo, you can play co-ed, and you can also play obviously against each other. The way I play this is solo, and therefore as a consequence we have what are referred to as the potential enemy forces, the PEF. It allows me to play whether it's the Americans or the NVA, but we'll see through the rules about how that works. Now let's start with the board itself. You'll see that it's quite convenient that this tabletop actually has a number of rectangles on it. The way the game is structured is that essentially we can play the game on a 3x3 table, so that might be just 3 foot by 3 foot, or it can be as extended as much as you wish. So in this particular game we'll see about a number of different board shapes, if you like, but the convenience of this is that I'll try and point out as clearly as possible about how the figures move on each individual board, and then how the enemy are positioned in such a way that it makes it into an interesting game. Let's also talk about dice. It's D6, so it's standard dice, and the way we tend to play it refers to reps, and that is the reputation of the characters themselves. So, for example, our star will have a reputation, or rep, of 5, and when we look to act, it tends to be that we roll 2 dice and see how many meet the rep, i.e. 5 or lower. If we get 2 or 1 or 0 of those numbers, there are different responses and different actions, but that's how the game flows. Okay, so starting at page 3, let's have a look at our stars and grunts, and to show you what the characteristics are of the players. First thing to note is the reputation of the star, that's you, will be 5. So your rep will start as 5, and the non-player characters, the grunts, we can roll for. Here's your first choice. In terms of being the star, you can either start your tour of duty as a private. It's challenging, and therefore you're not going to be in control of the squad in the same way, or you can be the officer. It's up to you, it's your game, but let's assume you're just going to start off as a private. Now, as a star, what's the difference between a star and a grunt? Well, a star will have 3 key advantages. I'm not going to go into the detail of each. I'll mention them, but I'll just prompt you to check those out on pages 3 and 4, so you understand about what these advantages are. But the advantages are the star power, extraordinary effort, and free will. A final point is that the rep can go up and down if you are following a campaign. So if it's a one-off battle, that's fine and just stays as 5. But you can go up and down based on the fact of what we have for what's gone on through your campaign. You'll also see on page 5 we now have attributes. So of attributes, it's optional whether you want to take the characters even further with further detail. But if you do, then the star has 2 attributes and each grunt has 1. Just roll a d6 to see which table you want to have, and then another d6 in order to see what the attribute is. So now that we have our characters, the next thing to do is to have a look at the actual army lists itself, starting on page 7, and see what forces we have. As I say, for my example here, I'm looking at the American Army and the NVA. So as I mentioned at the start, you're operating within a squad, the squad operating within a platoon. So we would have 3 squads within the platoon itself. So what we need to focus on also is to say which potential characters are with that squad. So what I mean by that is whether we have a medic, a forward observer, or indeed a radio telephone operator. Very simply put, in terms of knowing whether one of those individuals is with the unit, we'd roll a d6. If we get a 1 or a 2 of each of the 3 options, they will be with you as a squad. Alternatively, again, this is your game. You want to start off with someone with the radio or a medic, just start it that way. It's no problem to do it, just to try them out. Now, we've talked about individuals joining the squad. We've also talked about the difference between stars and grunts, and also mentioned about attributes. But at the moment, we don't actually know the size of our particular squad. So, as I'm taking the Americans, if we look on page 8, it's helpful because it tells us about units 1965 to 70. So I'm going to take a 1968 American squad. We'll have rolled beforehand to see whether we have a medic or anything like that. But let's just focus on the standard infantry we're going to get with the unit. So, what is the strength of the unit? So a paper strength of a squad would be to say that the unit itself has 10 men with it. However, what we can do is that we can roll. So we'll roll and 1d6 and add 5 to it. Now if we get a 6, we have to take it down to 10 men in total. Let's assume, just for convenience sake, I get a 3. So it means I have 8 infantry. The next thing is to determine who is the officer, what is their rep. So we roll a d6, but we half it effectively, or it's a half d6. So a 1 or 2 will be a 1, 3 or 4 a 2, and 5 or 6 a 3. So let's assume then that we get a 6. So it's a 3 on the table, and let's see what we've got. So we've got 8 men, 1 obviously being myself as the star. And if we have a 3, it means that our NCO isn't great with the rep. So their rep is 3, and they're armed with an M16. That leaves us with 6 further men to pick, and we just go down the table to see who they are, what their rep is, and indeed what their weapon would be. So, therefore, if we've got 6 more men, it means we can take 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and 9. And looking across, 3 of those men have a rep of 4, 3 of them have a rep of 3, and in terms about their armament, we have a light machine gun, a grenade launcher and pistol. We have that twice, in fact, and the remainder all have an M16. So you should see the figures in front of you here. Now we've got essentially 2 men with an M79. It's the grenade launcher. We've got a light machine gun, and the rest all have an M16. As far as my character is concerned, although I have a rep of 5, the commanding officer, in fact, has a rep of 3. Now you can see, for my figures, there are 9 men there in total, 1 of which is with the radio, and the guy next to him, to the left, that's me, so that's my character. And to the right-hand side here is the NCO gesturing, and then we've got 6 other men in total. I only actually have 1 with an M79 at the second, so I've just changed that for a standard M16. And so let's have a look at the groups themselves. If they're all together, if they're all within a group of 6 inches, then we operate as a single unit under the leader. However, we can split, and I'm going to split this into two smaller groups in terms of we're going to have a fire team with the M60, the machine gun, and then we're going to have another unit advancing with the M79, with the grenade launcher, as two separate teams and how they operate. So, if we were a single leader, all the operation and all of the decision making in terms of leaders would take place with our NCO, remembering that the NCO's rep is 3. If of the two teams they separate out where there isn't a man within 6 inches, they are two separate groups, and then we have a chain of command where it's the highest leader level which will take command at that point. And so, for the first game of FNG, we have our Americans dropped here via a Huey. This is going to be their first action, and the mission here is to advance across to this side of the board and to clear out these two particular buildings. I've mentioned already that you could have the board which is 3 by 3, so we're going to make it easy. Small game, so we've got these 9 rectangles, and we'll see that we've got 1, 2, 3 down the left hand side, 4, 5, 6 in the middle, and then 7, 8 and 9, these 3 here, may have what we have the potential enemy forces. Now I'll explain how they appear as we go, but to be simple, what we've got at the moment is that we have our civilians. The Americans aren't necessarily sure whether they are going to be the NVA or indeed potentially the Viet Cong, and instead, as they advance through these squares, we'll have to roll and see what appears. So, first of all, as the Huey leaves, let's see how this unit begins to advance. The question is, how many PEF do we have? So we have 1 plus 1 half dice, so 1, 2 will give us 1, 3, 4, 2, and 5, 6, 3. So we get another 2, so 3 in total. So the way we work with the potential enemy forces, so we have to work out where they are in relation to the table. Mentioned already, we've got 9 rectangles, so it's going to be the ones which are the 7, 8 and 9. And so let's have a look and see where they appear. So 1, 2, they appear in 7, 3, 4 in 8, 5, 6 in 9. So we've got 2 in 7 and 1 in 8. And so for the game, this is where they start. So this is our PEF. Let's have a look and see where the Americans start and how the both units begin to operate. So first turn is we have activation. We roll to the rep of the figures. Now all of the PEF have a rep of 4. Remember, our officer for the Americans has a rep of 3, so we need 3 or less, or 4 or less for the rep. The green dice is going to be the NVA. And so it means the NVA can activate, but the Americans cannot. Now, in addition, the numbers also add up to 7, so there's the possibility of reinforcements. Okay, so we've rolled a 7. Now, although the Americans can't activate, they have the highest number, so it's actually the Americans who see if they receive any reinforcements. And the way we work it out is with the investment level. So, let me tell you what that's all about. In brief, the investment level for the Americans is essentially around how important this particular campaign is. You'll start with either a 3 or a 4, 4 being if the campaign is particularly critical, or depending on where the campaign is towards the end of the war or the start, we can really determine ourselves. In this situation, I'm going to say that the investment level is 3, particularly because we've also got a new unit here, so by potentially being a quiet sector. So what we're going to say is it's going to be as important to the Americans as it is for the NVA. So that means we have an investment level of 3. With an investment level of 3, we then roll 2d6 for the Americans. And we'll see we have 2 2s there. So we've passed with 2d6. Now with 2d6, it suggests we can get reinforcements. So let's roll a d6 to see what type and where. And we have a 6. So with a 6, what we would then do is add the investment level. We could add a further 1 if we were on an attack game, -1 if it was a patrol game, but let's just say that it's 3 for the investment level, plus 6 it gives us a 9, and therefore the reinforcements for the Americans would be that we have 1 squad here, but we would actually get the rest of the platoon, so we would have another 2 squads to join. So therefore I'm going to continue this game with this particular squad, but we're going to expect at any given moment that the Hueys return and we have another 2 squads to join. But as this is just to work through the rules, I'm just going to carry on just with this unit. Now if we remember, in the actual turn itself we got a 7 where we had a 6 for the Americans, so the unit can't move itself, and indeed the only unit that can is the PEF. Now this is how it works. We roll 2d6 for each of these 3 potential forces, and if we get 2 of the reps, so the rep is 4, if we get 4 or less twice, they will move 8 inches diagonally if necessary towards the Americans. If we only pass with 1, they will move 8 inches away, and if we get none, they'll stay exactly where they are. So let's start here. And that's none, so they'll stay exactly where they are. Let's have the man nearest to us. And passes with 1, so we'll move 8 inches away. Third, however, will move 8 inches towards. And as a result, that's the end of turn 1. Okay, let's start with turn 2. The Americans still can't be activated, and the PEF can. So the Americans once again aren't moving, and then these 3 are. So let's start with the nearest to us. Let's roll on here. We got 2 6s. They're definitely not going anywhere. And further away, got there at 2, so it certainly will do. On the back of the board, effectively. 2, that will go back to where it was beforehand. And so we've got the potential enemy forces moving further forward again, and let's see whether we can get these Americans activated. Let's roll the dice over here, see if we can get a bit of better luck for the Americans. No, we can't. It's a 7. It's going to be the PEF again. I've already done the reinforcement rules, so we've already seen how that works once. I won't repeat it here, but again, potentially we might have more forces in for the Americans, and it shows really how, although we start with just a squad, this game can grow in terms of size quite quickly. Over here for movement. Will it move? No, it just stays still. Now that passes only with 1, so that would actually move. I might as well do it straight away from here out there to what is the edge of the board. So although I have further coverage there, because I'm covering just these 9 rectangles, that's now effectively the edge of the board there, right at the back. And the same again, so really the activity is much more likely to be with this character. And at the end of turn 3, this is what we look like. Right, I'm going to see all forces moving. Again, this would be a 7, and this time we would have potential reinforcements for the PEF. We can get reinforcements for the PEF, so we would have more characters adding into the table. I'm not going to do it here because it's the same principle that we've already gone through once, but what we can see is at least we've got the forces moving. Now, because the PEF is the higher of the two numbers, it will move first. This is our character here, but unfortunately it would move away, so it would move 8 inches backwards, and our two characters on the edge, this one to us, will stay where it is, and the last one, the same again. Now we can activate our American forces, and a normal move is 8 inches, so got some choices if you wanted to move and try and go through the sort of jungle area. Obviously that would limit the movement. It might alternatively give some better cover. However, let's remember what the mission is. It's to investigate the buildings, so that's the first place we're going to. Now the Americans continue to advance and get towards this building. However, the officer or the NCO who's right at the front, in actual fact, is now in a potential line of sight of the enemy over there, out in the open. So now, with a potential line of sight, we need to see whether any of the PEF actually exist and who is there. Now I just want to clarify a couple of things. In the rule set it's looking at the PEF. It talks about them being in the same square effectively. But I'm going to use the rule where it talks about recon by fire. So for example, if we were in the same square, so for example it might be this one, the rule talks about the possibility of firing into an area where we think there might be forces. Now in this case we have our character in this rectangle, and our potential enemy is over here, and I think this is down to line of sight, and we're going to test here as well. So let's have a look at the process. Now we rolled 2d6 against the rep of the PEF, which is 4. Okay, so that's 2, and I think we've definitely got contact. Okay, so when we engage with the PEF, we now need to roll whether it's one of two things. It can either be a booby trap or enemy forces. So we've got, how we work this out is with the investment level. So we know already that if that's a 3, if we roll a 1, then we're going to say it's a booby trap. If we roll 2 or more, and therefore it takes us to a score of 5, it means we have enemy. So for the purposes here, I'm going to say that we're going to engage with enemy forces, and then to determine what type of force, we then roll 2d6, and then we'll cover the forces that we get in their enemy list. Okay, so we've got the roll here of 12. Now, it could be NVA, or it could be Viet Cong, etc. Now, the figures I've got, and the ones I want to show here, are NVA. So rather than roll, I'm just going to make sure we've got NVA, and the next question we need to answer is, how many of them are there? So working this through, the calculation is to start with the number of characters in our squad, or the American squad, which is 9, and then roll a half d6 and add that to the squad number. So we've got 9, and then add 3 takes us to 12. Roll a half d6 and subtract it from the new total. We've got 12 minus 3 down to 9. And so based on that, we've unearthed 9 NVA. And so we need to go down to the squad numbers on page 10 just to work out how it's structured and who will be facing. And so replacing the PEF here is 9 of the NVA. Essentially we've got a whole line of troops with a light machine gun. I'm sure there'll be a rocket launcher somewhere, but there's a whole line up against the rice field, and there's going to be some immediate firing. I think there's a couple of things that need to be determined here. We've got 2 men which are in sight now of the NVA on the other side. Question for me would be, who fires first? We might say that they're in a set position over here, the NVA, but we don't know, because remember it was the PEF that moved backwards, and indeed the unit might just be moving into position similarly to the Americans here. And so I'm going to roll based on their rep to see who has initiative and firing first. Secondly, if you remember right at the start, we talked about attributes. Now these two individuals, they aren't the star, they are grunts, even though the one on the front is the NCO. But I think we could roll and see if there are any particular attributes that might help them in this situation. So for the NCO at the front, we have 2 dice. Green dice first is which table, the red dice is which number. So let's take a look. Okay, 3 and 5. Okay, well that's a good result, isn't it, for the guy right at the front. Table 3 and 5 is the crack shot. Roll 3d6 when shooting. The second is the man with the grenade launcher. Table there is 4 and 6. Good character here too. So we've got a tough guy. So rather than leave the fight, he'll duck back. Now, of the 2 units, we'll see whether the man in front with his M16 is going to fire at the light machine gun, or whether the other way around. Who has the better rep? Well, in fact, it's 1H. Based on the fact that the NCO firing is a crack shot, I'm going to say he can go first. Now, the way it works is that he has an opportunity, not just hitting one target, but more than one. So the M16 has an opportunity of hitting up to 2 men within 3 inches of each other. So we're going to fire at the guy who is the light machine gun lying down, and to well, it's to the right of the screen, actually, to the left of the light machine gun. Those 2 men are in the line of sight. Remember, the crack shot has 3 dice, counting the best 2. So we have 2 above the rep, 1 is the result. Now with 1 as a result, it's a miss. So therefore the light machine gun is going to return fire, and its swathe is ultimately to a target of 5. Now there are only 2 in light, so therefore he's going to fire 3 against the front man and 2 at the man behind him. Remembering we have a rep of 4 here, and 2 is certainly a hit. Work out how many times he's hit. Twice and 3 times. The NCO is hit 3 times, so I need to roll and see what the consequence is. So 2 are above the rep, and that means he's certainly out of the fight. Now, because it's not a 6, he's not killed, it takes 2 wounds. What we could do, we could roll also to see if he had a flak jacket, and we'll see whether that acts effectively as a save. So we can roll again. If we get a 1, 2, 3 on either of these, then he'll be out of the fight. And yes, he is. So, although the flak jacket with 1 wound would have meant that he would have ducked back, actually he's knocked out. The final point is to say that if we had a medic, then we could see how we could patch him up, but at the moment he's simply knocked out in that position. Now, the man behind him is still taking 2 shots, so we need to roll for that too. And that's certainly a miss with the first one, but a hit with the second. Need to try the same roll. That's a 3, and as a consequence the man will duck back. Now I would point out at this point that you can, when it comes to take a roll, we can fire with the light machine gun, and if you want you can take it where rather than fire for every individual shot, so remember we had 3 as a target to the NCO and 2 to the grenade launcher character, you could simply say, if we rolled and got roll for the 2 rep, we could simply say it's a hit on all of the targets. It's entirely up to yourself which you prefer to do. For me, I think it's a little all or nothing, particularly with machine guns. If we say that all of them are on target, I think you can go into a little bit more detail if you wish, but certainly you can roll. It's very much, as I said right at the start, it's very much your game. So you can roll whether you want to have all 5, for example, with this light machine gun, all of them hitting with 1 roll, or you can do them individually. Now, I think what I'm going to do, as we're just looking at the rules here, Rather than continue further on some of the other areas, we've done shooting, and I think one of the interesting things is to just look at what happens when helicopters appear. It's important to do that, and that's an interesting part of the game, and we've already said at the earlier on that the Americans could get reinforcements. So I thought I'll close off this particular video of introduction to how we play with what happens with helicopters. Okay, so it's your imagination to think whether this helicopter, or indeed more than one helicopter coming in, will bring in either to pick up the men and pull them out, or whether it's going to be the remainder of that platoon, whether we're going to get more forces to overwhelm the NVA. The way we test it to start off with is that we need to test against the enemy investment level, which is 3, just to see if there's any activity. Needs to be the investment level or lower. Right, with a 1, there's firing. Now you can either determine it yourself based on the figures, or you can roll for it, whether it's going to be rifles, light machine guns, or whether there's a rocket launcher about. So we're going to roll 1, 2 for the rifles, 3, 4 light machine gun, 5, 6 there's a rocket, 2 we've only got rifles. And with rifles, if we roll 1 to 4, nothing happens. 5 and it aborts. 6, it's a crash. A 1, nothing happens. So for this scenario, the helicopter lands, and whether we now see a larger platoon, or whether it simply picks up the men and leaves, well, I'll leave it to your imagination. Okay, I'm going to stop here. The idea of this how to play video, just to give you an introduction of the game itself, how we structure this over the board, the introduction of the PEF. We've looked at the characters themselves, we've looked at our stars and our grunts, and then introduced movement, how we structure in terms of groups, and indeed had shooting at the end. We have melee to add, perhaps if we want to have some hand-to-hand fighting, but you've got the rules set there. The principles are very similar in terms of how we work that with the reps, etc. And also I've introduced right at the end there the helicopter and what might or might not happen. I really do like this rule set, and indeed the 2-hour war games format is that we're trying to add characters. So within the game that you play, it might be relatively brief, and for example in this particular scenario we've got one of our NCOs wounded, so we might evacuate it with the helicopter. And you keep your characters, you keep the experiences that they have. I think the game has shown that with reinforcements you can get a lot of troops in, and it's also interesting with our PEF forces and how they develop. So just want to finish off by saying thanks very much for watching. I've just established a new Facebook group, which is the Vietnam War Wargaming group, and so if you want to add into that any thoughts or ideas, or indeed if you want to subscribe to this channel, if you're not subscribed already, then please do so. And thanks again for watching, and there'll be lots of more to come. So see you next time.